welcome back to another sewing tutorial. I am Lizzie and today we're making something super stylish and elegant together, a sleeveless vest. It's got these beautiful princess seams, a twisted neckline, full button fastening at the center front and back neckline, and 4 well pockets. I've been living in these pieces all spring and summer long. It is so versatile and trust me, it is so easy to make. So let's dive right in. First thing first, you can find the pattern linked in the description box below. And once you've printed out your pattern and cut the fabric, we're gonna do a little prep work for the center front and side front pieces before we start sewing. You'll notice that these pieces have curved edges that are cut slightly on bias, so they will stretch over time. To keep them from getting distorted, we need to stabilize those edges with some interfacing tape. So before you even take the pattern off the fabric, measure the exact length of those curves and then cut your interfacing tape to match those measurements. On the center front edge, stop where the curve becomes a straight line here. So take them over to your ironing machine and using medium heat, fuse the tape onto the wrong side of the fabric. This step is very crucial, so please don't skip it because it really affects how the neckline will fit on your body. Alright, now let's gather all of the pieces and lay them out in order. Center front first, then side front, side back, and finally center back in the middle. With the right sides together, pin all these pieces along the vertical seams, just like this. There are notches to guide you so you can pin them correctly. Then sew them together with a 1 cm seam allowance. When you get to the bust area on the princess seam, it will be a little bit tricky because these are reversed curves. The side front edge is slightly longer than the center front edge, so you need to ease the fabric in slowly so that the edges match up. Before pressing those seams open, we're going to clip into the curved seam allowance, like at the bust or the waist, so that everything lies flat and nice. Next, let's add those 4 well pockets to our vest. First, decide where you want to put the pockets. You can follow the marks on the pattern or try the vest on and mark the position on your body. Grab your 4 pocket pieces and fuse interfacing onto the wrong side of 2 of them. This will be the welt, and the other 2 without interfacing will be the pocket facings. Fold the welt pocket in half lengthwise and press to create a crease. On the welt piece, draw a guideline 1 cm away from the fold. This will be the thickness of your pocket opening, and I'm making my 10 cm long since that's the length of my pocket. Do the same on the facing pieces. Draw a guideline 1 cm away from one long edge. And on your garment at the position you marked earlier, draw a rectangular frame that's 10 by 1 cm. Now place the welt piece with the fold facing down towards you and then matching the marks on the welt with the corners of the rectangular frame. Pin at the corners to hold everything in place and then sew the welt straight from one corner to the other. Starting and stopping exactly at the pin marks. Remember to backstitching at both ends. Precision here is key, guys, because it will determine how even your pockets look. Once sewn, fold the seam allowance of the welt down and then pin them temporarily in place. And place the pocket facing right sides together with the garment along the seam, pinning the guideline of the upper line of the rectangle frame and then sew straight from one pin to the other. Of course, backstitching carefully at both ends. Okay, after sewing the welt and the pocket facing, we will cut through the middle of the frame and extend the line to both sides. Be careful to cut only through one layer of fabric. Stop 1 centimeter before the end and then rotate your scissors to cut diagonally right to the corner. Create a V at both ends. Just be so careful that not cut through the seam. Now turn the welt and the pocket facing to the wrong side and then tucking the corners of the welt inside too. On the right side of the garment, it should look like this. If everything is lined up correctly, the princess seam should match itself, and then the welt should sit nicely inside the rectangular frame. Pin the welt to the pocket facing and then flip the seam allowance of the facing on the wrong side so that you can see what's going on inside. Smooth out everything and sew right along the seam allowance line. You see a little triangle here? Just sew a short line over it. Then repeat the whole thing for the other side. Since this is just a full pocket, we need to close the pocket opening completely. So just flip the garment up and stitch a line across the bottom of the welt pocket through all the layers. And that's how you finish this full single welt pocket. Next up, we will attach 2 buttons and button loops to the right back neckline. So you can either buy some thin wrap satin cords to make the loops, or making it yourself if you want a matching color. Here's how to do it. Cut a bias strip that is 3.5 cm wide and at least 10 cm long if you're making 2 loops and your button is around 1.5 cm in diameter. Fold the strip in half lengthwise with the wrong sides facing out and sew a tiny seam. Here's the trick. Start with a wider seam allowance and then slowly taper down. I started at 1 cm and then gradually moved the strip to make the seam smaller. This will make it easier to turn the tube right side out later. Now we're gonna trim the seam allowance. Then use a hand needle with a thick double thread. Insert the thread into the wider end of the strap and then feed the needle through the casing. Tuck onto the thread to turn the tube right side out. Once it's started, the rest is easy. Let's continue to pull it out. And yes, we've got our tiny spaghetti strap. We're gonna cut it into 2 5 cm length for the loops. It's gonna make 2 loops. Fold the loops in half with the ends overlapping or side by side like this. Then hand tack or machine stitch to create the loops. On the right side of your garment, position the first loop at the top of the right back neckline, leaving 1 cm for the seam allowance. Then position the second loop 1 cm below the first one, again leaving 1 cm from the bottom neckline. Run a straight stitch to keep them in place. Okay, now let's move on to making the lining. We need to trim the lining edges because the lining is usually need to be a little bit smaller than the main shell to prevent it from peeking out. So we're gonna carefully trim 3 mm from all the edges of the lining pieces except for the princess seams, side seams, and the side back vertical seams. In other words, trim all the outer edges. Then assemble the lining just like we did with the main shell, but of course without the welt pocket and the button loops. Making sure that you're leaving 10 to 15 cm gap in one of the side seams so that we can turn the garment right side out later. Now we're gonna place the main shell right side up and then place the lining on top, right side down, so the right sides are touching. Pin all around the edges except for the hemline. And sew them together with a 1 cm seam allowance. You might find that at the back neckline or the center front corners, the seams don't match exactly anymore because of the trimming we did before. But don't worry, just ease the fabric a little and it will turn out fine. We'll also need to understitch all around to have the lining stay inside. You won't be able to understitch all the way to corners, but that's okay. Just go as far as you can. Okay, we are almost done. We will need to close the hemline. Pin the hemline of the shell and of the lining together. Then stitch at 1 cm seam allowance. In order to turn the gown on the right side out easily and keep the seams flat and neat, we're gonna clip into the curved edges at the neckline and the armholes. Then reach through the gap and pull the right side out. I always love this step because, I don't know, it's just so satisfying. It might look a little bit odd at first, but the magic happens when you press everything flat with your iron. If you've done it right, the main shells roll a little bit inside and the lining should stay neatly inside like this. Just look at how it transforms. Okay, so at this point you can already close the gap on the lining. But here's a little tip if you want to secure the bust area. I know some of you might feel a little bit uneasy to wear this type of halter neck if it doesn't really fit perfectly at the neckline. If you find there's some extra room, you can add elastic at the back to make it fit better. This step is completely optional, but I've made both versions with and without elastic, and each has its own charm. So to add the elastic, make a straight stitch from one side seam to the other, about 2.2 cm from the back top edge. If you are using a 2 cm elastic band like me, attach a safety pin to one end of the elastic and then insert it into the tunnel through the gap. Thread the elastic from one side seam to the other, pinning it in place and leaving 1 cm for seam allowance at each end. Then with the main shell facing up, we're gonna run a stitch on top of the side seams to secure the elastic inside. This stitch should be invisible from the outside. At this point, you can close the gap in the lining by hand with a blind stitch, or just join the edges and run a straight stitch through both layers to close it. I like mine do by hand for a cleaner finish. It just looks nicer to me. And the last step is to add the button loops and sew on the buttons. You can use this pattern as a reference for their placement, but I strongly recommend trying the vest on you and then marking the button positions yourself to fit your figure. A good rule of thumb is to place one button at the bust level and one at the waist level for a better fit. And that's it, we are done. The vest looks so cute. I call it a vest, but I think probably just a top with some vest-like detail. If you leave out the full welt pockets, the rest is totally doable for a confident beginner. I hope I explained everything clearly and that now you want to make one for yourself. If you do, please tag me at Lizzie Pattern and share your version of this vest. I love to see your work. And until then, I see you next time. Bye!